Hello, happy Friday. Welcome, everybody. I will go ahead and give you just a few more moments to settle in, and we will get started. All right, so welcome to today's meeting. Just a quick tech intro here. Please do mute your microphones, and as we will have the presenters talk, and if you have any questions, please feel free to write any questions or comments in the chat box, or you can put your little hand up. So the presenters know, to unmute you, and you can ask questions if you would like live. Anyway, and without any further ado, I will hand it off to our presenters today. Welcome, Nathan and Beth.
Thanks, Bova. My name is Nathan Chicolo. I'm the director within the Office of Admission and Evaluation here at the University of Phoenix. One of the areas that I oversee is international evaluation. So I brought our resident expert, Beth Simpson, today, and she manages that international evaluation team. And so I'll turn it over to Beth real quick, and she can introduce herself.
So hi, everyone. I'm Beth. I manage, as Nathan said, the International Admissions and Evaluation team. This is both the team that brings in or assembles the student files and then the team that evaluates them. I've been working at the University of Phoenix in international admissions for, I think 22 years, 21 years, a while. And I'm happy to join you today, and so we can talk about working with international students.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. And if we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So full transparency, we're pretty new to the AACRAO Transfer and Articulation Community of Practice group. Dr. Mark Booker reached out to us recently and asked if Beth and I could share some of our experience in this space, and so we gladly accepted that offer. And so our understanding is that this group is really just a way for the community to get together and talk about different things within the industry, trends, those types of things related to transfer credit, PLA, articulation. And so, as we kind of engage, I think the goal is that, a network can be created in this space and can be used as a phone a friend resource in the future if something wonky pops up and you need some help with it. So Beth and I are definitely happy to help out as best we can going forward. Next slide, please. And so our agenda today, we wanted to kind of touch on some pretty general international evaluation thoughts. Beth will take a deeper dive into best practices when working with international credentials. And then we should certainly have some time at the end for some open discussion, some Q&A. What I would just ask is, if you have items that you'd like to discuss that are best suited for that open discussion forum, if you don't mind holding those till the end, and we can certainly discuss those topics. However, as we're going through the presentation, if there are questions or items that come up related to the content that we're talking about, I'm going to do my best to kind of monitor the chat as Beth is presenting. And so I'll try and inject those questions as best I can. If I don't get to them all, if I miss one, we can certainly circle back at the end and make sure that we get those addressed for you. So just some general thoughts on international credential evaluation. So especially for those that are new to the transfer field, this is a space that it's really something that you need to align yourself with some common industry practices. There are professional agencies that can assist with that if your university or institution so chooses. One of the things is the United States has a very unique educational system compared to other areas of the world. And so speaking in very general terms, students in the US are very transient. They may have a long break in between their educational experience. They may start their educational pursuit later on in life, or they may take a few courses or credits from one institution, hop to the next, changing programs along the way. For the international students, again, speaking in very general terms, those students typically reside in, one institution, attend one program, and they're either going down a more vocational terminal degree track, or they are in some type of profession that would want additional higher ed credentials. And so that beginning credential would then lead to the next and to the next. And so trying to understand how those credentials and those degrees fit and align with the US educational system can be difficult. AACRAO has, sorry, if we can go back. Thank you. AACRAO has a bunch of great resources for you. AACRAO Edge is a great one. It's an electronic database that has a lot of information related to international evaluation. There's specific institution information in there for international institutions. And so that's something that at UOP we use quite frequently. The AACRAO International Guide is a publication that came out a few years ago. It's great. It's kind of a how-to book to set up an international evaluation department within your institution. And so definitely something to leverage if that's what you're trying to do. There are also numerous professional evaluation agencies that can help you as you're reviewing these types of international credentials. There are agencies that can look at comparability and how that credential equates to a US credential. They also do some type of authentication in which you can verify that the documents are authentic and what the student is claiming them to be. And then there's also translation services that can assist you in trying to decipher what may be on that document. In general, kind of the two guidelines for handling international credentials. One is definitely don't assume, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it may not be a duck. And so you do have to kind of make sure what you're looking at is true to what you think. And so utilizing those resources is super important. And then maybe the biggest one is, just understanding you don't have to kind of do this in a vacuum. There are definitely ways that you can find information either through resources, through committees and groups like this, or through things like the AACRAO listserv where you can ask questions, and Beth will go into more detail in that space. So with that, I'll turn it over to Beth and she can go into more detail for you.
Sorry, I was muted. So starting off, one of the things that it's a point of clarification that I keep running into, particularly with those who may be less familiar with the nuts and bolts of this process, is understanding certain terms. So when we're talking about an evaluation, we're talking about a statement of the comparability of either the credential completed or the coursework completed. This is as opposed to a translation, which would be a word-for-word conversion of the documents from one language to another. Something I kind of run into periodically in my work is that there may be some confusion between those two items. And an evaluation should never be considered a translation, even though it may break the document down in considerable detail. And then there's authentication, and particularly when dealing with international documents, there are a lot of opportunities for fraud, and there are a lot of opportunities for things to kind of go sideways. So authenticating the documents, making sure that they are what the sending institution thinks of as the official record, and that the documents are what the student says they are. So making sure that those terms are understood as it pertains to the processes is really pretty key. Next slide, please. So when you're deciding whether to just build an in-house functionality, evaluation functionality, or whether you want to go with an external agencies, there are some foundational needs that are not dependent on either of those choices. They're universal. So you need standardized evaluation related processes, how you're going to bring in the documents, how you're going to process through things, and what are the admissions policies that your institution is going to put in place as far as international students. Yeah, it may start with, are we going to evaluate these internally, or are we going to require agency evaluations? But how those are handled are kind of, that's where you start, is how you're going to handle these students. Are you going to evaluate internally or externally? How are you going to handle English language proficiency measures? Are you going to use TOEFL exclusively? Are you going to use Duolingo? Or are you going to use TOEIC, Cambridge English? You know, there are a whole lot of options out there, and there are a whole lot of price points for them. And in my experience, they're all very good. So qualitatively, that you're in good hands there. Staffing. Who are you going to have evaluate these files? Because even if you get it, if you choose to go with external agencies, you still have to have someone process through those files to look at the evaluations, to analyze what they're saying, to make sure that all your documentation is complete, and to render an admissions decision based on your institution's policies in conjunction with the documents in front of you. So who's going to do that? How are you going to ensure accuracy and consistency? And then resources are things you need to think about, both internal, building an internal resource. I cannot recommend doing that enough. We have one, it's called our international handbook. It is a beast. It is a very large beast, but it documents where we put credentials, what level they are, transferability, admissibility into different levels of study, recognized institutions, document types, all kinds of stuff, because there's nothing quite as frustrating as spending 6 hours trying to run something to ground and then coming back 2 months later and you have to do it all over again, or 2 years later. So if you have it documented, you can come back and look at it repeatedly and it's there. And it not only ensures that you don't have to waste time and do double work, but that your processes day to day, month to month, year to year are consistent. And then external resources, you know, what do you want to get? Like Nathan alluded to, the International Guide and AACRAO Edge. Please get AACRAO Edge. It will save you. And other resources that are available out there so that you can support your work as you move through the processes. Next slide, please. So probably the first question is, what do you need in terms of scale? You know, how many students do you have presenting international education credentials? Do you have, in an admission cycle, do you have 400 or do you have 4? If you have, you know, just a very few, it may not be worth the effort for you to build an internal evaluation function. It may be better for your institution just to go with external agencies. Are your international enrollments consistent? Do you have any trends? Do you have specific countries that you have students coming in from? Do you have, broadly speaking, do you have more that come from some countries and fewer from others? Do you want to evaluate, if you go with an in-house function, do you want to evaluate all or just a few? And if so, which countries? I know at one point we had started out, when I first started with international evaluation, we started out with Canada and Mexico being evaluated internally, and gradually scaled it up. And now we pretty much evaluate all of them, just because as time went on, it became clear that's what we needed to do. And then you need to think about pain points, you know, where are things, where are there potential problems that are going to slow down the process or create churn? Where might it create potential risk to your institution? Things like that. Those are important things to consider, because on balance, Is it worth it to put up with those or to find solutions for those, or are they significant enough that maybe it's better for you just to go with using external agencies? Next slide. So things to be aware of. Oh, excuse me, one second. Industry standards and best practices. And this may be, well, the AACRAO International Guide lays out a lot of those, but how do we approach looking at an institution, looking at a credential, what level of documentation, etc. One of the big things is 3-year degrees, the 12 plus 3 degrees. Does your institution want to take them? They're out there and there are a lot of them. Just how are you able to leverage the resources and things available so that you can make sure that you're running the cleanest operation possible? Ongoing process analysis. This is one of the things that entertains me to no end, but it's continually looking at your process and at how you're doing things. Is this the best way to do it? Is this working for us? Is there a better way? How can we tweak things or fix them to make them more efficient and in keeping with those best practices? Training and development time. I will tell you that it takes a long time to train an international evaluator. In my experience, optimally from start to from beginning the training to when this individual may be reliable to evaluate files without close supervision at the volume that my institution handles, it's about 1.5 years. Once we went to everybody working from home permanently during COVID, I would say that time frame went up to 2 years. It takes a while. And it takes some real effort to build in consistency as far as that individual, but also amongst your whole team of evaluators. And you need to be able to find a way to keep an eye on that consistency and make sure that not only are things accurate, but evaluator A and evaluator B and evaluator C are all doing it the same way. Turnover, I don't experience a lot of it happily, but it creates problems, because if you have someone leave, obviously if you have to fill that position, you're going to have to start over on the training and development process. So that's also something to consider. Do you have really stable, tenured people in your area? The availability and cost of resources. There is a lot of material out there, and when I started, it was all very expensive. I will say that AACRAO about 10, 12 years ago, and Edge did a truly wonderful thing in that it had to be a monumental lift. I was not involved in it, but I heard about it. They scanned all of the AACRAO publications for international evaluation into Edge. So for example, in the India section in Edge, they have all of the AACRAO publications going back to like 1970 that involve the Indian system of education. This is a massive resource that's available. It's intensely useful because once upon a time, each of those volumes was about $80 a piece. And it adds up if you're going to be evaluating a lot of countries and you need people to have access to plenty of things available, the books that they may need to evaluate. And other resources that may be kind of challenging to obtain. Cultural awareness, this is kind of a broad, loose descriptor, but really what I mean by that is what's going on in the world, what's happening in terms of world events that may affect what you're doing. The earthquake in Haiti a number of years ago, if you have students enrolling from Haiti, how that may affect your ability to obtain documents, to research institutions and credentials, to authenticate items. Afghanistan, and what has happened with the system of education there, and refugees from Afghanistan coming potentially into the United States and potentially seeking further education. Students from Ukraine, things like that, and being aware of those items, that can really make a difference too. And do you have the ability and the facility to pivot to meet those needs? So those are things to consider. Next slide, please. So what makes a good evaluator? I have had wonderful evaluators and I've had terrible evaluators. And what really, Nathan's laughing because he knows what I'm talking about. But as far as fit and skills, a really good evaluator is very detail oriented. They're very disciplined. They know the pieces that they need to look into. They're highly analytical, but they also, the ones who are very good also occasionally have to be reminded to see the forest despite the trees. They are very methodical in their decision making. They are very comfortable with gray areas because this is not an area where it's easy to make consistent, hard, black and white rules. They're determined. It may take a while to really hunt down what you need to know, and you can't give up on it, even though it may be tempting. Research experience. You really need to be able to understand how to go about conducting research, how to dig into things, how to vet resources. Yeah, it's easy to find stuff on Wikipedia, but Wikipedia is not notoriously reliable. Language skills are helpful. They're not a must-have, but they are helpful. For example, we have a lot of Spanish language documents that come through, and it's really useful for my team to be able to read through those. I have a number of people who can read Spanish, who can look through and understand, okay, this is what this is, because, you know, while you may have standards for what a good translation is, that doesn't mean that the translation is really what it needs to be. And sometimes, having been a translator, I will say that sometimes it's really easy to flip into evaluator mode and make assumptions about how the language on the document should be interpreted. International knowledge or experience. This helps tremendously. Just as fundamental as it may sound, knowing where places are in the world is useful. Understanding little bits about cultures helps a lot. And just being, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but just being aware of what's going on in the world. And then absolutely fundamentally key is familiarity with institution policy. Not just knowing what it is, but understanding what the reasoning behind it is at your institution, because that will always inform the decision on comparability or admissibility. I tend to use the term comparability rather than equivalence because, you know, equivalence implies that everything kind of puzzle pieces together really nicely, and it infrequently does. Rather often you're like, okay, this is close enough. It's not an exact thing, but that I can, this works, you know, and understanding the reasoning behind an institution policy helps to make those decisions. It helps interpret it in a way that pertains to that particular student. So next slide, please. And then you need to think about what your evaluation methodology is. And we'll look at, you know, the years of study, where a credential fits in the national benchmarking. The ladders that they have at Edge are awesome for that. and in in the home structure of education, does the credential lead to higher study? What type of study? Is it a terminal credential? Is it a vocational credential? How does it fit? When we evaluate for transfer credit, we convert using what we call a coefficient. And really what that is taking the unit, whatever unit it is describing the course weight on the document, on the academic record. And we will, essentially, we're solving for X. It's the ratio of what that unit is to US semester credits, or you can do it to quarter credits, whatever your institution uses. And that gives you a conversion rate or conversion number, and you multiply the weight times that, and that gives you the credit equivalent. I was kind of upset when I realized it was solving for X, you know, many years ago, but it's solving for X. And then converting grades. World Education Services has some good tools on that. Edge has some good tools on that. The various publications that are housed now in EDGE have some good tools on that. And then grade point average conversions. This is a rare treat because you have to convert the grades and you need to convert the course weight to get the grade point average. It's fun. And then just to reiterate, international is ripe with unique situations. I cannot emphasize enough how often I fuss at my team for trying to rely on memory. You need to use the resources available. You're not going to see the same thing twice that often. As I mentioned, I've been at this for quite a while. And I mean, just the other day, actually it was yesterday, one of my veteran evaluators brought me something from Germany. I'm like, what is that? I've never seen that before. You know, there's always something that comes up. So make sure that you cultivate relying on resources and industry standards to stay consistent. I live in fear of winging it and saying, well, we'll just do this, and then finding out that that's exactly the wrong thing to do. So next slide. As far as agencies are concerned, there are quite a few out there. NACES, and I'm terrible with acronyms, so I don't know what that stands for, but that is the that is kind of it's a voluntary organization, but the reputable and good evaluation agencies all belong to it. That's their link. You can find a list of them all there. WES is part of it, ECE, IERF, Silney and Associates, and so on and so forth. Really good, solid agencies there. You can find and should consider also the services they provide. A number offer translation services. A number of them do upfront document authentication and verification, whether it's through their own processes or requiring the documents be sent by the institution directly to the agency. You can do some looking also into what documents they include with the evaluation. Is there an added cost for that? Do they send authenticated copies with, etc.? And delivery. Most of them they'll deliver electronically. I'm not going to say universally because I haven't actually researched that, but you can get them electronically. Usually they'll have a thing where you set up an account and you can retrieve the documents as long as the student has authorized you to receive those documents. You know, do they mail additional hard copies? And then what's the cost? Most agencies will have kind of a sliding scale depending on what kind of an evaluation you want. Do you just want a general statement of comparability for grad admission? Do you want a course-by-course evaluation? Do you want a course-by-course evaluation with a GPA calculation? You know, is this for educational purposes? Is it sometimes there for licensure? You may have one that's being done for immigration purposes, etc. So those are things to factor in with agencies. And also, you know, we don't really have it on there, but the question becomes, does your institution want to cover the cost of those, or are you going to ask the student to do it? Because that can, for some students, be a bit of a barrier. Different evaluations can be fairly costly. So next slide, please. These are some recommended resources, and it's by no means exhaustive. But the AACRAO International Guide, the World Education Series Pure Publications, these are the ones that have been scanned into EDGE. So have the AACRAO Country Guides, national publications. My all-time favorite is the Association of Indian Universities Handbook on Indian Universities. And it's this mammoth compendium that has all of the recognized universities in India, the affiliate institutions, all the programs they offer. It can even break down how often in a program that exams, that the students sit for exams. So like if you have a student who's doing an MBBS, you know, a Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery, you see that they have 3 sets of exams that they sit for so that you know you're going to get 3 sets of mark sheets. You know, useful information like that. Professional organization publications, the NASA country guides. I don't have it on here, but IERF has the new country index, which is super helpful. NASA's old, it's a precursor to the country guides, but the handbook on the placement of foreign graduate students. And newsletters and listservs like the international activities listserv that AACRAO has. I think ECE has a few, WES has some. Things like that are very useful. excuse me, next slide, please. And then some of the web-based resources, EDGE, institution sites, Ministry of Education sites. If you're dealing particularly anything with the post-Bologna reforms, really isn't the word, but the updates with the Bologna Agreement to increase mobility and transferability among EU participant countries and their institutions. So you have Eurydice, which is at the europa.eu site. ENIC, NARIC, which is another European thing that has some really useful information in it. And contacts, like Education USA is kind of it's sort of like it's attached to the Department of State, but it's individuals in various countries whose specific function is to work with students seeking to come to the United States for education. And they know a great deal about various country systems of education and documentation. And if you're trying to authenticate something, they have contacts at institutions who can help you with that. And then institution websites, those are always great. And then also the World Higher Education Database, which is also really good, and that's a website. Most of these are free. EDGE is not, but it's awesome, so get it anyway. Next slide, please. So that's what I've got. I mean, it's very high level. I am happy to answer any questions you all might have. Nathan's good for some questions too. And, you know, my email is on here on a later slide. So if you ever feel like you need to contact me, absolutely feel free.
Yeah, and I didn't see any questions come through chat. So if anybody entered any and they didn't pop up, feel free to chime in here, or if you have any questions, feel free to unmute, and happy to field any questions or comments or discussions that you want to have. Maybe I'll pose a question to the group. How many of you have a current international evaluation process at your institution where you're looking at credentials and making an evaluation decision? And how is that going for you?
Nathan, this is Kristen from Thomas Edison State University.
Hey.
We actually don't do our own evaluations. We did extensive research on the organizations that do the evaluations, the separate, evaluation organizations, and we've made a determination based on several criteria, which ones we are willing to accept. And so we require that our students would send us an evaluation from one of those agencies in order for us to transfer the credit in. That seems to work out the best for us. Totally. And we do have a pretty high volume of foreign students that come in with foreign schooling. So I'm thinking Beth, when you were talking about it taking out a year and a half to 2 hours to train, if that's what it takes us to train just a regular transfer evaluator. So I can't even imagine if we had to incorporate evaluating and doing that evaluation for foreign credentials on our own. But just to give you an example of how we do.
Well, fortunately, I have an extremely veteran staff, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. I have 2 recent hires, and by recent I mean like 3.5 years ago. And that was sufficiently painful. I think if my next least experienced person's been with me for like 14 years, and I think if they left, I'd cry. So I get it.
And I do think that's the biggest challenge, right? Like if staff leaves, it's not just you're replacing that person, but trying to replace the knowledge that they're taking with them as they're leaving. It's certainly a big challenge. So I certainly don't blame anyone for wanting to go outside of their own institution, use a third-party evaluation agency to kind of help with that process. Any other questions or comments related to this or anything else international? All right. Well, seeing no questions coming through the chat and hearing no other questions popping up, like Beth said, our contact information is here on the screen. If you have questions, stuff come up, feel free to reach out to us directly. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have, or talk through weird situations or whatever. We're here for you. But yeah, I appreciate everyone's time this afternoon joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.